You think one recording saves you?
I'm not saving me, I'm saving the truth.
The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Meridian Hotel ballroom, and with it, my 14-year marriage exploded into 1,000 glittering pieces. My wife, Catherine, stood there in her red designer gown, her lips still pressed against my boss, Richard Blackwell's mouth, while 300 of Manhattan's legal elite watched in stunned silence. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Surprise, darling, she whispered, pressing a manila envelope into my frozen hands. Consider yourself served. The crowd erupted into whispers and poorly concealed laughter. Someone's phone camera flashed. I stood there like a statue, watching my professional reputation crumble alongside my personal life, all while wearing a $1,000 tuxedo that suddenly felt like a straitjacket. My name is Ethan Grant, and I'm about to become the most dangerous man in corporate law. 3 hours earlier, I'd been adjusting my bow tie in our penthouse bathroom mirror, making small talk with my reflection about the evening ahead. Another night in the shark tank, I'd muttered. Except tonight the sharks are wearing sequins and demanding we donate to their yacht funds. Catherine had swept past me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, her auburn hair perfectly styled, her figure stunning in that red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. She barely glanced at me. "You're late," she'd said, checking her phone for the 100th time that day. I'm always late to these things. It's my brand. I'd tried for humor, but she was already walking away, heels clicking against our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. The ride to the hotel had been silent except for her constant texting. I'd watched her manicured fingers fly across her phone screen, her face illuminated by the blue glow. If I'd been billing her for emotional labor, Richard Blackwell would owe me about $50,000 by now. "Work emergency?" I'd asked. Something like that. She hadn't looked up. Now I understood exactly what kind of emergency required her immediate attention. The Meridian Hotel ballroom was packed with Manhattan's legal royalty. Partners from every major firm, judges, prosecutors, and enough political figures to fill a corruption trial. The annual Legal Excellence Awards were always a spectacle, but tonight felt different. The energy was electric, predatory. I'd been scheduled to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Judge Morrison, a man I genuinely respected. I'd spent weeks crafting the perfect speech, balancing reverence with just enough wit to keep the audience engaged. Now that speech felt like evidence of my own naivety. Richard Blackwell had cornered me near the bar 20 minutes before the ceremony. Silver-haired, 6'2", with the kind of authoritative presence that made juries trust him and opponents fear him. He was everything I'd aspired to become when I joined Blackwell, Mason & Associates 15 years ago. "Ethan, we need to talk," he'd said, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "About the Morrison case, I've got the files ready for Monday. Not about work." His smile had been predatory. "About changes. Big changes." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights had dimmed and the ceremony began. I'd walked to the podium, delivered my speech to polite applause, and handed Judge Morrison his crystal trophy. Standard corporate theater. Then Catherine had appeared at my elbow. "Ladies and gentlemen," she'd announced, grabbing the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd spent years managing the firm's public relations. "I have an announcement of my own." The crowd had fallen silent. Catherine commanded attention like that. Beautiful, poised, magnetic. I'd fallen in love with that confidence 14 years ago. Tonight, it would destroy me. "Some of you know that my husband Ethan and I have had our challenges," she'd continued, her voice carrying perfectly across the ballroom. "What you don't know is that I've found someone who truly understands me." That's when she'd turned to Richard, grabbed his face, and kissed him with the kind of passion she hadn't shown me in years. The champagne glass had slipped from my hand purely by accident, but the crash had punctuated the moment perfectly. The envelope she'd pressed into my hands contained divorce papers. I could tell without opening it. I'd drafted enough of them to recognize the weight and texture. Professional hazard. "This is awkward," I'd said into the microphone, my voice somehow steady. Usually when I get served, it's during business hours. A few people had laughed. Most had just stared, their phones already out, recording what would undoubtedly become the most watched legal scandal of the year. I'd set the microphone down carefully, nodded to Judge Morrison, and walked out of the ballroom with whatever dignity I could salvage. Behind me, the whispers had grown to a roar. Poor Ethan, outlawyered in his own marriage. She always was ambitious. Guess she found a faster track to partner. Richard's been working late with her for months. We all knew. Everyone had known except me. The brilliant corporate attorney who could spot a hostile takeover from 3/4 away had missed the one happening in his own home. I'd made it to my Mercedes in the hotel parking garage before the rage hit me. Not the hot, destructive kind of anger that makes men do stupid things. The cold, calculating fury that makes lawyers dangerous. Pulling out my phone, I'd scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. My private investigator, Jake Morrison, Judge Morrison's nephew, ironically enough. "Jake, it's Ethan. I need everything you have on Catherine and Richard. Everything, and I need it tonight." "Jesus, Ethan, what happened?" "My wife just served me divorce papers in front of 300 people, after kissing my boss, at a legal awards ceremony." "Holy shit. Yeah, I've got files. Lots of files. You sure you want to see them tonight?" "I'm sure. Send them to my office. I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Ethan, some of this stuff is pretty rough. Maybe wait until—" "Jake, send the files." I'd hung up and started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I could see people streaming out of the hotel, their phones glowing as they shared the news of my humiliation across social media. By tomorrow morning, every lawyer in Manhattan would know that Ethan Grant had been publicly cuckolded by his own boss, but they didn't know Ethan Grant very well. I'd built my career on preparation, patience, and the ability to see 3 moves ahead of my opponents. Tonight, Catherine and Richard had played their hand beautifully. They'd caught me completely off guard, humiliated me in front of my peers, and handed me divorce papers with surgical precision. What they hadn't counted on was that I'd spent 15 years learning every dirty trick in Richard's playbook, and unlike them, I played to win. The drive to my office took 18 minutes through Manhattan traffic. 18 minutes to transform from victim to predator. By the time I'd parked in the underground garage of the Chrysler Building, I wasn't Ethan Grant, the humiliated husband. I was Ethan Grant, the lawyer who'd never lost a case that mattered. And this one mattered more than any jury verdict ever would. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to a war room. At 11:30 p.m., the offices of Blackwell, Mason, and Associates were eerily quiet, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic far below. I'd always loved the office at night. It felt like a place where real work got done, away from the politics and posturing of daylight hours. Tonight, it felt like a tomb I was about to rob. My corner office overlooked Manhattan's glittering landscape, a view I'd earned through 15 years of 60-hour weeks and ruthless dedication. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd sacrificed my marriage for this career, only to have my marriage destroy my career in a single evening. Jake's files were waiting in my email, 63 pages of surveillance reports, photographs, financial records, and phone logs. I poured myself 3 fingers of Macallan from the bottle I kept for closing major deals, settled into my leather chair, and began reading the story of my wife's betrayal. The affair had started 8 months ago, not long after Catherine had been promoted to head of public relations. The first photo was dated March 15th. Catherine and Richard having lunch at Le Bernardin, their hands touching across the table. By April, they were meeting at the Carlisle Hotel twice a week. By May, Richard had given her a key to his Hamptons house. But the real revelation was in the financial records. Catherine and Richard weren't just having an affair. They were planning a hostile takeover of the firm. Richard had been secretly meeting with investors, using Catherine's PR expertise to package the deal. They'd planned to push out the other partners, including Mason himself, and restructure the firm as a boutique corporate practice. My money was supposed to finance the whole operation. As a partner, I had a 12% stake in the firm, worth approximately $120 million. Catherine, as my wife, would get half of that in the divorce. Combined with Richard's connections and her media savvy, they'd have everything they needed to execute their coup. Except they'd made one critical error. They'd assumed I'd go quietly. I opened my laptop and began typing. First, an email to the firm's chief financial officer, requesting an immediate audit of all accounts associated with Richard's cases. Then a message to Mason himself, marked urgent, requesting a meeting first thing Monday morning. But those were just the opening moves. At 12:47 a.m., I initiated the nuclear option. As a named partner with full access to the firm's financial systems, I had the authority to freeze any suspicious transactions pending board review. Within minutes, I'd locked down Richard's expense accounts, his client trust funds, and his access to the firm's credit lines. Then I turned to my own assets. Catherine had access to our joint accounts, our credit cards, and the investment portfolio I'd spent years building. Not anymore. I spent the next hour systematically dismantling our financial relationship, moving money to accounts she'd never seen, canceling cards, and restructuring investments. By 2 a.m., Catherine Grant had gone from wealthy socialite to financially stranded. But I wasn't done. I pulled up the contact list I'd built over 15 years of corporate law, journalists, bloggers, social media influencers, anyone who covered Manhattan's legal scene. The story of my public humiliation was already spreading, but I could control the narrative. My first call went to Miranda Walsh at Legal Times, a reporter who'd been trying to get dirt on Richard for years. "Miranda, it's Ethan Grant. I know it's late, but I have a story for you." "Jesus, Ethan, I heard about tonight. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm motivated. How would you like exclusive access to a corruption story involving kickbacks, client fund mismanagement, and ethics violations that go all the way to the managing partner level?" "Are you talking about Blackwell?" "I'm talking about a pattern of behavior that would make your career. But I need your word that you'll verify everything independently. I'm not looking for a hit piece. I'm looking for justice. Send me what you have. If it checks out, it'll be front page Monday morning." I attached Jake's files and hit send. Then I made similar calls to 3 other reporters, each with a different angle on the story. By morning, Richard Blackwell would be fighting fires on multiple fronts. At 3 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Catherine, calling from what I assumed was Richard's apartment. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her increasingly frantic messages. "Ethan, what did you do? My cards aren't working." "Ethan, this is ridiculous. Call me back." "Ethan, I know you're angry, but we can work this out. Don't do anything stupid." I'm stupid. The only stupid thing I'd done was trust her. I was drafting an email to our children's private school, alerting them to potential custody issues, when my office door opened. Richard Blackwell stood there in his rumpled tuxedo, his silver hair disheveled, his face flushed with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded. I leaned back in my chair, studying him with the same detachment I'd used to examine a hostile witness. "I'm working late. You know how it is. Billable hours don't track themselves. You froze my accounts. I initiated a financial audit pending board review, standard procedure when there are questions about fund management. There are no questions about... There are now." I gestured to the stack of printouts on my desk. 8 months of suspicious transactions, unauthorized client meetings, and what appears to be a systematic effort to defraud the partnership. The board's going to have lots of questions. Richard stepped into my office, closing the door behind him. "Ethan, let's be adults about this. Yes, Catherine and I developed feelings for each other. Yes, the situation got complicated, but there's no need to destroy everything we've built here." "We didn't build anything, Richard. I built a reputation, a client base, and a partnership stake. You built a house of cards that's about to collapse. The affair doesn't change our professional relationship." I stood up slowly, walking around my desk until I was close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. "You're right. The affair is personal. But the financial irregularities, the secret investor meetings, the plan to restructure the firm using my money, that's business." His face went white. "How did you—" "I'm a lawyer, Richard. A very good lawyer. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside my window, Manhattan sparkled like a circuit board, all those lives and ambitions and secrets humming with electricity. Richard had taught me that the law was just another form of warfare, conducted with briefs instead of bullets. Tonight, he was about to learn what happens when you teach someone to be better at war than you are. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "I want you to understand something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't just betray me personally. You betrayed every client who trusted you, every partner who worked with you, every principal this firm was supposed to represent. So no, Richard, we can't be adults about this. We can't work it out. What we can do is watch you explain to the New York State Bar Association why you thought client funds were your personal piggy bank." I walked back to my desk and picked up my phone. "Security? This is Ethan Grant in 4207. I have an unauthorized person in my office who's making threats. Could you send someone up?" Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious about security breaches." He stared at me for another moment, then turned and walked out. I heard his footsteps echoing down the hallway, growing fainter until the elevator doors closed behind him. At 4 a.m., I finally headed home. The penthouse felt different now, not like a sanctuary, but like a crime scene. Catherine's things were everywhere, her designer shoes by the door, her coffee cup in the sink, her perfume lingering in the air, evidence of a life that had been a lie. I poured another drink and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city that had made me and was about to remake me again. Somewhere out there, Catherine was probably crying into Richard's shoulder, playing the victim in a drama of her own creation. Somewhere else, reporters were fact-checking the story that would end Richard's career. And here I was, no longer the man who'd been humiliated at a charity gala, I was something new, something harder, something that Catherine and Richard had created through their betrayal but would never be able to control. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Nice work tonight. This is going to be fun. A friend." I deleted the message without responding. I didn't need friends anymore. I needed targets. The story broke at 6 a.m. on 3 different platforms simultaneously. Miranda Walsh's piece in Legal Times led with "Managing Partner Accused of Fund Mismanagement," while the Post went with "Lawyer's Wife Dumps Him for Boss at Fancy Party." The legal blogs were already dissecting every angle, complete with photos from the gala and speculation about criminal charges. I read them all while drinking coffee in my kitchen, still wearing yesterday's tuxedo shirt. Catherine hadn't come home. Her absence felt like a gift. My phone had been buzzing constantly since sunrise. Reporters, colleagues, clients, and what felt like every lawyer in Manhattan looking for gossip. I ignored them all except for one call from Lou Brennan, my closest friend and the only person whose opinion still mattered to me. "Jesus Christ, Ethan, are you okay?" "I'm spectacular, Lou. Never better." "Don't give me that bullshit. I saw the video. Half the city saw the video." "Then half the city knows not to trust their wives around Richard Blackwell." Lou was quiet for a moment. He'd been my friend since law school, had been best man at my wedding, was godfather to my kids. If anyone could cut through my defenses, it was him. "What's your play here?" he asked finally. "My play is to survive. Richard and Catherine thought they could destroy me quietly, take my money, and rebuild their lives on the wreckage. They thought wrong." "The financial stuff? Is it real?" "Every word. Richard's been treating client accounts like his personal slush fund for months. The affair was just the cherry on top of a very expensive sundae. And Catherine." I looked out at the city, watching the morning sun reflect off 1,000 windows. Catherine made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. By 9 a.m., the firm was in chaos. I'd driven to the office expecting drama, but the scene in the lobby exceeded my expectations. Reporters clustered around the entrance, security guards checking IDs, and a line of black cars that suggested major clients were jumping ship. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to a battlefield. Partners huddled in small groups, whispering and checking their phones. Associates scurried between offices carrying boxes of files. The whole place had the energy of a sinking ship. Mason's secretary, Mrs. Chen, waved me into the conference room where the emergency partners meeting was already in progress. 7 of the firm's 9 partners sat around the mahogany table, their faces grim. Richard's chair was empty. "Ethan," Mason said as I entered, "we need to talk." James Mason was 73 years old, a founding partner who'd built the firm from nothing into one of Manhattan's most prestigious practices. He'd been my mentor, my advocate, and the closest thing to a father figure I'd had in the legal world. Today, he looked every one of his 73 years. "Where's Richard?" I asked, taking my usual seat. "Richard is meeting with his attorney," said Patricia Vance, our litigation chief. "The question is whether he'll still be a partner by the end of the week." "The Bar Association is launching an investigation," added David Kim from Corporate Law. 3 clients have already pulled their retainers. The Morrison Industries deal is on hold pending review. I listened to the litany of disasters with professional detachment. Richard's empire was crumbling exactly as I'd planned, but faster than I'd expected. The legal community was small and vicious. "What about Catherine?" asked Mason. "What about her?" "She's been our PR director for 2 years. If she was involved in Richard's financial irregularities..." "She's been terminated," I said simply. "As of this morning. I've already had her access revoked and her office cleared." The partners exchanged glances. Patricia leaned forward. "Ethan, I know this is personal for you, but we need to handle this carefully. If it looks like you're using firm resources for a personal vendetta..." "This isn't personal," I interrupted. "This is business. Richard violated his fiduciary duties, misappropriated client funds, and compromised the firm's integrity. Catherine facilitated those violations through her position in PR. They both need to go." "And if they fight back?" asked Kim. I smiled for the first time in 12 hours. "Let them try." The meeting ended with Richard's suspension pending investigation and Catherine's immediate termination. I'd won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. I was walking back to my office when I saw her. Catherine stood by the elevators, still wearing the red dress from the gala, but wrinkled now. Her perfect hair disheveled, her makeup smeared. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. "Ethan, please, we need to talk." "No, we don't." I kept walking. "You can't just destroy my life because you're angry." I stopped and turned to face her. "I'm not destroying your life, Catherine. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. I loved you, she said, her voice breaking. I still love you. But Richard and I, we connect in ways you and I never could. You connect over embezzled client funds and fraudulent investment schemes. Very romantic. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? You think I don't know about the takeover plan? You think I don't know you were going to use my money to finance Richard's coup? Her face went pale. How did you? I'm a lawyer, Catherine. A very good lawyer. Better than Richard, apparently, since he thought he could steal from his own partners without getting caught. Security appeared at my elbow. 2 guards I'd called while walking down the hallway. Mrs. Grant, you need to leave the building, one of them said politely but firmly. This is my husband, she protested. Not for long, I said, handing her a business card. My divorce attorney will be in touch. As the elevator doors closed between us, Catherine looked smaller somehow, diminished. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the sound of 300 people laughing at my humiliation, and the feeling passed. Back in my office, I had 17 messages from reporters and 43 from potential clients. Word was spreading that Ethan Grant was the partner who'd exposed the corruption, the whistleblower who'd saved the firm. My phone was ringing with new business. It's funny how quickly the narrative can change. This morning, I'd been the cuckolded husband. By afternoon, I was the hero who'd sacrificed his marriage to protect his clients. I liked the new story better. At 3 p.m., Jake Morrison called with an update. Richard's at the Carlisle Hotel, drinking heavily and making calls to every contact he has. Word is he's trying to start his own firm, but nobody wants to touch him. Catherine's at her sister's place in Brooklyn, crying and calling you every 10 minutes. What about the media? They're eating it up. The Post wants to do a follow-up piece about corporate corruption. Legal Times is digging into Richard's client list, and someone leaked audio of Catherine talking to her friend Tara about the affair. What kind of audio? The kind where she calls you boring and says Richard knows how to treat a real woman. Also some stuff about how she deserves better than a husband who works all the time. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Catherine's words stung, but they also provided ammunition. A woman who publicly humiliated her husband and then mocked him to her friends wasn't going to generate much sympathy. Jake, I need you to do something else for me. Name it. Find out everything you can about Richard's finances. Personal finances. I want to know about every asset, every investment, every debt. And I want to know about his ex-wife's alimony payments. You think he's been skimming to pay personal expenses? I think Richard Blackwell has been living beyond his means for years, and I want to know exactly how far beyond. By 5 p.m., the office had cleared out, except for the partners and a few associates working on damage control. I was reviewing client contracts when my assistant knocked on my door. Mr. Grant, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's about your wife. The woman was Tara Hoffman, Catherine's best friend and frequent lunch companion. Blonde, 40-ish, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she had something important to say. Ethan, I'm so sorry about what happened. I had no idea Catherine was going to do that. What can I do for you, Tara? She sat down across from my desk, fidgeting with her purse. I think you should know. Catherine's been planning this for months. The affair, the divorce, all of it. She's been asking me about prenups, about asset division, about how to maximize her settlement. Why are you telling me this? Because I've known you both for 10 years, and what she did was wrong. And because... She hesitated. Because she asked me to lie for her. To say you were abusive, that you threatened her. She wants me to testify in the divorce proceedings. I felt something cold settle in my chest. And will you? No. But she's going to find someone who will. She's desperate, Ethan. And desperate people do terrible things. After Tara left, I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Manhattan. The city looked different from up here, smaller, more manageable. Like a chessboard where I could see all the pieces and plan my moves accordingly. Catherine wanted to play dirty. Richard wanted to destroy everything I'd built. They had no idea what they'd started. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never called. Judge Morrison? It's Ethan Grant. I think we need to have a conversation about justice. The war was about to begin in earnest. Judge Morrison agreed to meet me at his private club on Saturday morning. The Union Club was old Manhattan money personified. Leather chairs, crystal decanters, and the kind of quiet dignity that came from 2 centuries of influence. It was also where Richard Blackwell had been a member for 15 years, until his membership was quietly suspended pending the ethics investigation. Morrison was waiting for me in the library, a distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human weakness from the bench. He'd been a family friend for years, which made this conversation both easier and more difficult. Ethan, I'm sorry about what you're going through. Eleanor and I have always been fond of Catherine. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that. But I'm not here about my marriage. You're here about Richard. I nodded, pulling out a leather portfolio. I'm here about a pattern of corruption that goes back 3 years, involves 6 figures in misappropriated funds, and threatens the integrity of every case Richard's handled in that time. Morrison's expression hardened as he reviewed the documents. Financial records, client communications, evidence of kickbacks and fraudulent billing. Jake had been thorough. Every transaction was documented, every irregularity highlighted. This is damning, Morrison said finally. But why bring it to me? The Bar Association has jurisdiction over attorney misconduct. Because Richard's been appearing before you regularly. The Morrison Industries case, the Steinberg merger, the Patterson bankruptcy. If his judgment was compromised by financial pressure, if he was making decisions based on personal gain rather than client interest, then every ruling in those cases is suspect. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the papers. You realize what you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to consider whether justice was served in cases where the attorney may have been compromised. And you realize how this looks, a man whose wife left him for his boss, seeking revenge through the courts. I leaned forward. Judge, with respect, this isn't about revenge. This is about the law. Richard Blackwell violated his oath, betrayed his clients, and corrupted the judicial process. The fact that he also destroyed my marriage is secondary. Is it? The question hung in the air between us. Morrison was right to be suspicious. Revenge and justice often wore the same face. But the evidence was solid, the violations clear. Whatever my personal motivations, Richard's crimes were real. What do you need from me? Morrison asked finally. A formal request for review of all cases where Richard appeared before you in the last 3 years, and a recommendation to the disciplinary committee that they expedite their investigation. Consider it done. I left the club feeling like I'd won another battle, but the war was far from over. Catherine and Richard weren't going to surrender quietly, and they still had weapons I hadn't neutralized. That afternoon, I drove to my children's soccer games in Westchester. Ava, 8 years old and fierce as a lion, played midfielder with the kind of intensity that reminded me of myself. Lucas, 10 and thoughtful, preferred books to sports, but attended every game to support his sister. They didn't know about the divorce yet. Catherine and I had agreed to tell them together, in our own time, away from the media circus. But I could see the questions in their eyes when Catherine didn't show up, when other parents whispered and pointed. Dad, why are there photographers outside our school? Ava asked as we drove home. Some people are very interested in Daddy's work right now. Are we famous? We're notorious, I said, then caught myself. We're getting a lot of attention because of some problems at Daddy's office. Is Mommy okay? She didn't come home last night? I felt something twist in my chest. Mommy's fine, sweetheart. She's staying with Aunt Sarah for a few days while we work some things out. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The truth was that their mother had destroyed our family for money and ambition, and their father was systematically destroying the man she'd chosen over us. That conversation would come later, when they were old enough to understand that sometimes good people do terrible things, and sometimes terrible people get exactly what they deserve. Sunday morning brought new developments. Richard had hired a crisis management firm and was pushing back against the corruption allegations. His attorney had issued a statement calling the charges the desperate fabrications of a man unhinged by personal betrayal. Catherine had given an interview to the Post, painting herself as the victim of an abusive marriage who'd found the courage to leave. He was controlling, she'd told the reporter. He monitored my spending, questioned my friendships, and made me feel like a prisoner in my own home. Richard helped me see that I deserved better. I read the article twice, marveling at her ability to rewrite history. The monitoring had been our joint financial planning sessions. The questioning had been normal spousal conversations about her increasingly late nights. The prison had been a $12 million penthouse with unlimited credit cards and complete freedom to pursue her career. But Catherine had always been gifted at spinning narratives. It's what made her so good at public relations and what made her so dangerous as an enemy. My phone rang at noon. Lou Brennan, calling from his office. Ethan, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where 3 of your biggest clients just called to express concerns about your stability. Apparently, Catherine's been reaching out to people, suggesting that you're having some kind of breakdown. I felt the familiar cold anger settling in my chest. What exactly is she saying? That you've become obsessed with destroying Richard, that you're using client resources for personal vendettas, that you can't be trusted to handle major cases while you're going through a divorce. And what did you tell them? I told them that you're the most competent attorney I've ever worked with, and that anyone who believes Catherine Grant over Ethan Grant is an idiot. But Ethan, some of them are listening to her. I walked to my office window, looking out at the city that had been my kingdom and was now my battlefield. Catherine was smarter than I'd given her credit for. She couldn't attack me legally. The evidence against Richard was too strong. But she could attack my reputation, my client relationships, my ability to practice law. Lou, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Set up a meeting with the clients who called, all of them together tomorrow morning, and make sure they understand that this isn't a request. What are you planning? I'm planning to remind them why they hired me in the first place. Monday morning's client meeting was held in the firm's largest conference room. 12 executives representing some of Manhattan's most powerful corporations, all of them nervous about being associated with a scandal. I'd spent Sunday night preparing for this presentation the way I'd prepare for a Supreme Court argument. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, thank you for coming. I know you have concerns about recent events, and you have a right to answers. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. 3 years ago, Morrison Industries hired this firm to handle their merger with Steinberg Corp. The deal was worth $800 million. Richard Blackwell was the lead attorney. Click. 2 years ago, Patterson Holdings retained us for their Chapter 11 reorganization. Richard handled that case as well. Last year, he managed the Cromwell acquisition for $300 million. Click. What you don't know is that in each of these cases, Richard Blackwell received undocumented payments from opposing counsel, made decisions that benefited his personal investments, and billed for services that were never performed. The room was silent. I clicked through slide after slide of evidence. Financial records, email communications, witness statements. The same evidence I'd given to Judge Morrison, but presented with the clinical precision of a prosecutor making a case. The question you're asking yourselves is whether you can trust Blackwell, Mason, and Associates to handle your legal affairs. The answer is that you never could trust Richard Blackwell, but you can trust the firm to hold him accountable. I clicked to the final slide. Richard Blackwell has been suspended pending investigation. His cases have been reassigned to other partners. The firm has implemented new oversight procedures to prevent future violations, and every client affected by his misconduct will receive full restitution. What about you? Asked Janet Morrison from Morrison Industries. Can we trust you to handle our affairs while you're going through a public divorce? Ms. Morrison, I've been handling your company's legal needs for 8 years. In that time, I've saved you approximately $40 million in litigation costs and regulatory fines. My personal life has never interfered with my professional obligations, and it won't start now. But your wife? My ex-wife is no longer associated with this firm in any capacity. Her opinions about my competence are irrelevant, and her attempts to interfere with my client relationships constitute tortious interference with business relations. I let that sink in for a moment. Which means that any client who terminates their relationship with me based on her false statements has grounds to sue her personally for damages. The meeting ended with all 12 clients confirming their continued retention. As they filed out, Janet Morrison lingered behind. Ethan, I'm sorry about what you're going through, but I have to ask, is this really about justice, or is it about revenge? I thought about Judge Morrison asking the same question, about Lou's concerns, about my children's confused faces when their mother didn't come home. Ms. Morrison, does it matter? Richard Blackwell committed crimes. Those crimes are being prosecuted. The fact that he also destroyed my marriage doesn't make the crimes less real. No, but it makes your motives suspect. My motives are irrelevant. The evidence speaks for itself. She nodded and left, but her question stayed with me. Was this about justice or revenge? And if it was revenge, did that make it wrong? That afternoon, I got my answer. Catherine appeared at my office without warning, escorted by building security after trying to force her way past reception. She looked terrible. Hollow-eyed, desperate, wearing the same clothes she'd worn in the post-interview. Ethan, please, you have to stop this. Stop what? You know what. The investigation, the media, the attacks on Richard. You're destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything, Catherine. I'm revealing what was already destroyed. Richard never stole anything. Those payments were legitimate consulting fees. From opposing counsel? In cases where he represented the other side? She was quiet for a moment, realizing she'd just confirmed the corruption. It's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud, Catherine. It looks like conspiracy. It looks like two people who thought they could steal from their partners and clients without consequences. We never meant to hurt you. You never meant to get caught. She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone realizes they've lost everything. What do you want? What will it take for you to stop? I looked at this woman I'd loved for 14 years, this stranger who'd betrayed everything we'd built together, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I want you to understand something, Catherine. You didn't just leave me. You tried to destroy me. You took everything I'd worked for and used it against me. You turned my own success into a weapon to humiliate me in front of everyone I respect. That's not... So no, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows exactly who you are and what you did. I'm going to make sure that Richard faces the full consequences of his crimes. And I'm going to make sure that neither of you ever has the power to hurt anyone else the way you hurt me. You're not the man I married, she whispered. No, I agreed. I'm better. Security escorted her out, and I returned to my work. Outside my window, Manhattan glittered in the afternoon sun, full of ambition and betrayal, and the endless human drama of people trying to destroy each other for money and power. I was no longer just a participant in that drama. I was directing it. And the final act was about to begin. The New York State Bar Association moved faster than I'd expected. By Wednesday morning, Richard's law license was suspended pending a full investigation. By Thursday, the FBI had opened a criminal inquiry into the client fund irregularities. By Friday, Richard Blackwell was no longer a lawyer. I watched his downfall from my office window, literally and figuratively. The federal building was visible from the 42nd floor, and I could see the media circus surrounding Richard's perp walk as he was arrested on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Catherine wasn't with him. She'd been arrested separately at her sister's house in Brooklyn. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent 15 years building a reputation as one of Manhattan's most ethical attorneys, only to discover I was working for one of its most corrupt. The media had picked up on that angle, painting me as the whistleblower who'd sacrificed his marriage to expose the truth. It was a good story. It was also mostly true. Lou knocked on my door as I was watching the news coverage. The partners want to see you. The emergency meeting was brief and unanimous. With Richard gone and the firm's reputation in tatters, they needed new leadership. The vote to make me managing partner was 7-0, with one abstention from Patricia Vance, who thought I was too emotionally compromised to run the firm. The clients trust you, Mason explained. The media sees you as the hero of this story. And frankly, you're the only partner who's come out of this mess with his reputation intact. What about the divorce? The personal scandal? What about it? Your wife cheated on you with a criminal, and you exposed the criminal. That makes you look like a victim, not a villain. I accepted the position with appropriate humility, but inside I was calculating. Managing partner meant control over the firm's resources, its client relationships, and its public image. It meant power. The kind of power Richard had used against me now turned to my advantage. The first thing I did was change the firm's name. Blackwell, Mason & Associates became Mason, Grant & Associates, with Richard's name scrubbed from every letterhead, business card, and directory listing. The second thing I did was hire a new head of public relations, someone with no connection to Catherine or her network of media contacts. The third thing I did was visit my children. Ava and Lucas were staying with Catherine's sister, Sarah, in Brooklyn while the custody battle played out. It was a temporary arrangement, supervised visits until the court could sort through the competing allegations of abuse and neglect that divorce attorneys love to throw around like confetti. Sarah's brownstone was modest compared to our penthouse, but warm in a way our home had never been. The kids seemed smaller somehow, confused by the sudden upheaval in their lives. They didn't understand why Mommy was on the news, why Daddy couldn't live with them, why everything had changed so suddenly. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" Lucas asked as we walked through Prospect Park. "Yes, buddy, we are." "Is it because of the man on TV? The one who got arrested?" "It's complicated, Lucas. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and those choices have consequences." "Did Mom make bad choices?" I stopped walking and knelt down so I was at his eye level. "Your mom and I both made mistakes, but that doesn't change how much we love you and Ava. That will never change." It was the right thing to say, but it felt hollow. The truth was that Catherine had chosen Richard over her own children, had been willing to destroy their family for money and ambition. The truth was that I was using every legal weapon at my disposal to make sure she paid for that choice. But they were 8 and 10 years old. They'd learn the truth soon enough. That weekend, I received an unexpected visitor. Tara Hoffman called and asked to meet me at a coffee shop in Soho, away from the media attention that still followed me everywhere. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse the way she had in my office. "Ethan, I need to tell you something about Catherine." "What about her?" "She's not handling this well. The arrest, the media, losing her job. She's talking about doing something drastic." "What kind of drastic?" "She thinks you orchestrated everything." The investigation, the charges, even Richard's arrest. She thinks you're some kind of criminal mastermind who destroyed her life for revenge. I almost laughed. Tara, I didn't orchestrate anything. I just revealed what was already there. Richard destroyed himself. I know that. You know that. But Catherine... She leaned forward, lowering her voice. She's been drinking heavily. She's been making threats. And she's been asking questions about your schedule, your security, where you go when you're not at the office. Are you saying she wants to hurt me? I'm saying she blames you for everything, and she's not thinking clearly. Be careful, Ethan. I thanked Tara and left the coffee shop with a new concern. Catherine desperate was one thing. Catherine dangerous was something else entirely. That night, I called Jake Morrison and asked him to increase security around my building and office. Then I called my attorney and requested an emergency custody hearing. If Catherine was becoming unstable, I needed to protect my children. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. It never happened. Sunday night at 11:30, my building's fire alarm went off. The doorman called my apartment to say there'd been a small fire in the parking garage. Nothing serious, but the fire department wanted all residents to evacuate as a precaution. I threw on clothes and headed for the stairwell, along with dozens of other residents. The lobby was chaos. People in bathrobes and pajamas, confused and annoyed at being roused from sleep. Fire trucks lined the street, their lights painting everything red and blue. That's when I saw her. Catherine stood across the street, still wearing the same clothes from her arrest photos, her hair wild, her eyes fixed on the building with an intensity that sent a chill through me. She was holding something in her hand, a phone, I realized, as if she was filming the evacuation. Our eyes met across the chaos of emergency vehicles and displaced residents. She smiled, not the warm smile I'd fallen in love with 14 years ago, but something cold and predatory. Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd. I found the fire chief and asked about the garage fire. Minor electrical issue, he said. Probably a short in one of the car chargers. We'll have it cleared up in an hour. But I knew it wasn't an electrical issue. Catherine had wanted me out of the building, vulnerable, visible. The question was why. I got my answer the next morning. The Post ran a front-page story with the headline, "Vengeful Lawyer's Reign of Terror." The article, bylined by a reporter I'd never heard of, painted me as an obsessed ex-husband who'd used my position to destroy innocent people. Sources close to the investigation say that Ethan Grant manipulated evidence, coerced witnesses, and used his influence with judges to railroad his ex-wife and her lover, the story read. What began as a legitimate ethics complaint has become a personal vendetta that threatens the integrity of Manhattan's legal system. The sources were anonymous, but the quotes were detailed and specific. Someone with inside knowledge had fed the reporter information designed to destroy my credibility. Someone who knew about the investigation, the evidence, and my relationship with Judge Morrison. Someone like Catherine. My phone was ringing before I finished reading the article. Clients, partners, reporters, everyone wanted to know if the allegations were true. I spent the morning in damage control mode, scheduling meetings and preparing statements, but the narrative was already shifting. The hero whistleblower was becoming the vindictive ex-husband. At noon, Judge Morrison called. "Ethan, we need to talk." We met at his chambers, away from the media circus. Morrison looked tired, older than his 73 years. "The Bar Association is asking questions about our relationship," he said, "about whether you had improper influence over the investigation." "Ah, Judge, you've seen the evidence. Richard's crimes are documented, verified, and undeniable." "I know that, but the appearance of impropriety is almost as damaging as actual impropriety. If it looks like you used our friendship to manipulate the system, then Catherine wins, or Richard goes free, and every client they defrauded gets nothing." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to recuse yourself from any further proceedings involving Richard or Catherine. Remove any appearance of bias. Let the evidence stand on its own." "And if that's not enough, then we'll deal with that when it happens." I left the courthouse knowing that Catherine had played her hand brilliantly. She couldn't attack the evidence against Richard. It was too strong. But she could attack me, make me the villain, turn my quest for justice into a story about obsession and abuse of power. The war had entered a new phase, and for the first time since this began, I wasn't sure I was winning. That evening, I sat in my office as the sun set over Manhattan, planning my next move. Catherine had shown me that she was willing to destroy herself, to destroy me. Richard was facing federal charges, but might escape if my credibility was compromised. My children were caught in the middle of a battle that was spiraling beyond anyone's control. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. "Jake, it's Ethan. I need you to find out everything, and I mean everything, about Catherine's activities since her arrest. Who she's been talking to, where she's been staying, how she's funding her legal defense. Everything. Ethan, are you sure you want to go down this road? Catherine started this war when she decided to destroy me publicly. Now she's trying to destroy me professionally. I'm not going to let her win. And if you become the monster she's painting you as? I looked out at the city lights, at the millions of people fighting their own battles for survival and success and revenge. Jake, I became a monster the night she kissed Richard in front of 300 people. The only question now is whether I'm going to be an effective monster or a defeated one. The final battle was about to begin, and this time there would be no survivors. Catherine's mistake was thinking she could outlawyer a lawyer. Her second mistake was underestimating how far I was willing to go to protect everything I'd built. Her third and final mistake was threatening my children. Jake's investigation revealed the scope of Catherine's desperation. She'd been living in a series of cheap hotels, funding her legal defense by selling jewelry and designer clothes. She'd been meeting with tabloid reporters, offering them increasingly salacious stories about our marriage. And she'd been stalking me, photographing my building, following my car, documenting my daily routine with the obsession of someone who'd lost touch with reality. But the most damaging revelation was her plan to kidnap Ava and Lucas. The evidence was in her laptop, which Jake had recovered from her hotel room through methods I didn't want to know about. Emails to a private investigator about obtaining false passports, research into countries without extradition treaties, flight schedules to South America. Catherine wasn't just trying to destroy my reputation. She was planning to steal my children and disappear. I called an emergency meeting with my attorney, the FBI agents handling Richard's case, and the family court judge overseeing our custody battle. The evidence was overwhelming. Catherine had crossed the line from desperate ex-wife to dangerous criminal. We can arrest her tonight, Agent Martinez told me. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, violation of custody orders, and a dozen other charges. No, I said. I have a better idea. Thursday evening, I arranged to meet Catherine at our old penthouse. She'd been calling me for days, alternating between threats and pleas, demanding a face-to-face meeting to work things out. I finally agreed, but on my terms. The penthouse felt like a museum of our former life. Catherine's things were gone, but the furniture remained, the art we'd collected together, the photographs of happier times. She was waiting for me in the living room, wearing a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral. "Thank you for coming," she said. "What do you want, Catherine?" "I want this to stop. The investigation, the charges, the media circus. Richard is facing 20 years in prison. I've lost everything. Isn't that enough?" "You haven't lost everything yet." She flinched at the implication. "What does that mean?" "It means I know about the passports, Catherine. I know about your plan to take Ava and Lucas to Argentina. I know about the private investigator, the fake identities, the offshore accounts." Her face went white. "You're insane. I would never—" "You would. You did. The evidence is sitting with the FBI right now." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sparkled like a circuit board, indifferent to the human drama playing out 40 stories above the street. "You destroyed my life," she whispered. "No, Catherine. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure everyone knew about it. I loved you once. Once. But not enough to stay faithful. Not enough to be honest. Not enough to put our children before your ambition." She started crying then, the kind of broken sobs that come when someone finally understands they've lost everything. "What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices." That's when she pulled out the gun. It was a small pistol, probably a .22, held in her shaking hands like she wasn't sure how to use it. Which she probably wasn't. Catherine had always hated violence, had never even watched action movies without covering her eyes. "You're going to call the FBI," she said, her voice trembling. "You're going to tell them the evidence was fabricated. You're going to drop the charges against Richard." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" "If I have to." I looked at this woman I'd once loved, now desperate and dangerous and completely out of options. "Catherine, even if you eliminate me, it won't change anything. The evidence will still exist. Richard will still go to prison, and you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing that our children will grow up believing their mother was a murderer. They'll understand. Someday they'll understand that I did it to protect them from you." "Protect them from what? From a father who loves them? From a stable home and a good education and every advantage money can buy? From a monster who destroys people for revenge." I took a step toward her. "Catherine, I'm not the monster in this story. You are. You're the one who betrayed her family. You're the one who stole from clients. You're the one holding a gun right now. Stay back. You're not going to shoot me, Catherine, because deep down, you know I'm right. You know that everything that's happened is the result of choices you made, and you know that eliminating me won't change any of that. I took another step. She was crying harder now, the gun wavering in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far. I know. I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to feel alive again. I know. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Underneath the desperation and the madness, I could see traces of the woman I'd married, the ambitious young lawyer who'd charmed me at a bar association mixer, the new mother who'd cried with joy when Ava was born, the partner who'd helped me build everything we'd achieved together. I forgive you, Catherine, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. She nodded, understanding. Then she set the gun down on the coffee table and collapsed into the sofa, her body racked with sobs. I called the FBI. Agent Martinez arrived with a full tactical team, expecting a hostage situation. Instead, they found Catherine Grant sitting quietly in handcuffs, confessing to conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, and a dozen other crimes. The gun was unloaded. She'd never intended to actually shoot me, just to scare me into compliance. It was her final miscalculation. The media loved the story of the desperate ex-wife's last stand. The headlines wrote themselves, Lawyer's ex pulls gun in custody battle. Divorce drama takes a dark turn. From penthouse to prison. Richard's trial began 2 weeks later. Without Catherine's testimony, she'd been deemed an unreliable witness due to her mental state. The prosecution relied entirely on the financial evidence I'd uncovered. It was more than enough. Richard Blackwell was convicted on 14 counts of fraud and conspiracy and sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Catherine pleaded guilty to avoid trial and received 5 years with the possibility of parole in 3. She would miss Ava's teenage years, Lucas's high school graduation, and any chance of rebuilding her relationship with her children. The custody hearing was a formality. I was awarded sole custody with supervised visitation rights for Catherine once she was released. Ava and Lucas moved back into the penthouse, where we began the long process of rebuilding our family. 6 months after Catherine's arrest, I stood in my office looking out at Manhattan's glittering skyline. Mason, Grant, and Associates was thriving. We'd gained more clients than we'd lost, and our reputation for integrity had been enhanced rather than damaged by the scandal. I was managing partner of one of the city's most prestigious firms, with a net worth that had actually increased during the divorce proceedings. I'd won everything. I'd destroyed my enemies, protected my children, and emerged from the wreckage stronger than before. So why did I feel so empty? Lou knocked on my door, interrupting my brooding. The Morrison Industries contracts are ready for your review, and your kids called. They want to know if you're coming to Ava's soccer game tonight. Tell them I'll be there. Ethan, are you okay? I turned away from the window. I'm fine, Lou. Better than fine. I'm victorious. You don't look victorious. You look tired. Tired of what? Tired of being the villain in your own story. I stared at him. I'm not the villain. Catherine and Richard were the villains. I was the hero who exposed them. Were you? Or were you just another lawyer who let revenge consume him until he couldn't tell the difference between justice and vengeance? Before I could answer, he was gone, leaving me alone with the question that had been haunting me for months. That night, I sat in the bleachers watching Ava dominate the soccer field with the same ruthless efficiency I'd used to destroy her mother. Lucas sat beside me, reading a book about ethics and philosophy. Too advanced for a 10-year-old, but he'd always been precocious. Dad, he said during halftime, was Mom really a bad person? Your mom made some bad choices, buddy, but that doesn't make her a bad person. Do you miss her? I thought about that question as I watched my daughter score another goal, as I felt the weight of my victory and the cost of my revenge. Did I miss Catherine? I missed the woman she'd been before ambition and desperation had corrupted her. I missed the family we'd built together, the life we'd shared before it all fell apart. But I didn't miss the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. I didn't miss wondering if my wife loved me or was just using me. I didn't miss being weak. Sometimes, I told my son, but sometimes people change so much that missing them is like missing someone who never really existed. Lucas nodded solemnly, as if he understood something about loss and change that most adults never grasped. The game ended with Ava's team winning 4-1. As we walked to the car, she grabbed my hand with the casual affection of a child who still believed her father could protect her from anything. Dad, are we going to be okay? We're going to be better than okay, sweetheart. We're going to be extraordinary. and for the first time in months, I believed it. I'd set out to destroy the people who'd betrayed me, and I'd succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. Richard Blackwell was in prison. Catherine was facing years behind bars. I had sole custody of my children, control of my firm, and a reputation as a man who couldn't be crossed without consequences. I'd won the war completely and utterly. The only casualty was the man I'd been before it started, the trusting husband, the ethical lawyer, the person who believed that good people were rewarded and bad people were punished by some cosmic sense of justice. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, more effective, someone who understood that justice and revenge were often the same thing, and that the only difference was who got to write the history. As we drove home through Manhattan's neon-lit canyons, I caught my reflection in the car window. I looked like a man who'd won everything he'd ever wanted and lost everything he'd never known he needed. But I looked like a winner. And in the end, that was enough. Next time, I thought to myself as we pulled into the garage of our building, I'll outsource my marriage to HR.